From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Ferris here on a Monday. I do indeed hope you had a good weekend. We have a good show on tap for you this morning. It's getting to the heart of a very controversial issue here in the state of Tennessee, nationally for that matter, and worldwide. The question after the horrible attacks in Paris as to security wherever it is you may live, and many people concerned about what's happening with Syrian refugees. As you know, here in the state of Tennessee, we, along with many other states in this country, take refugees in, okay? And the question is, should that still be happening with the existing Syrian refugees here? What happens with them? Should we accept more of them? We know that the governor has asked the federal government to stop sending more to us, but as we speak, the policy remains as is. You know, something that did make big headlines was State Representative Glenn Cassada talking about the idea of maybe going after some of these Syrian refugees that are already here, gathering them up to some point, returning them to ICE, the immigration with the federal government to address whether or not there's security risks and all that. We're going to talk about that with State Representative Glenn Cassada this morning, at least for the first half of the show. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you for coming on, and we're going to take phone calls as well if we can squeeze some in, 737-7587. Let me just start right at the top here with you, sir. If you would, have you modified your proposal in any way, or if not, articulate it for our viewers again, exactly what it is you'd like to see done with the Syrian refugees.
Yes, and I've even become more entrenched in my concern for the safety of my family and yours, reading the papers over the weekend, and I realized that my statements taken out of context sound hard. They sound hard. It's not used to what we do here in America. But when you look and you take my statements in context with what the FBI is saying, what Homeland Security is saying, and what the ISIS themselves are saying, I think it's prudent that, number one, no more Syrian refugees are allowed into the United States because of the embedded terrorists that are, and these aren't my words, Nick, these are the FBI, Homeland Security, the embedded terrorists that are in the Syrian refugee population, and those that are recently, and that's the key word, recently arrived, we need to go back and re-vet them because the FBI admits publicly to the U.S. Congress that they do not have the ability to properly vet terrorists from refugees. And I want to make sure Tennesseans are safe.
Tangibly, again, your proposal would be for Syrians that are here in this state, the refugees, if they're here right now, if there's a few in Nashville here, what would you like to see done with them?
As a state representative, I would like to pass legislation that says that, and we would have to depend upon FBI and TBI, but recently arrived Syrians. Recently arrived. We need to observe them, and if you read the article, this is what I advocated. We need to observe them, probable cause, based on FBI testimony.
So what does that mean? You want to gather them up, or do we want to send out the National Guard, you said, to round them up?
That would be the last thing we would do. The first thing is, with probable cause, recent arrivals, we need to observe them. Are they conducting terrorist activity now?
So put them under surveillance.
Under surveillance. If they prove that they are, then we need to have the National Guard pick them up and take them back to ICE.
All right. Now, as we sit here now, we don't know of any tangible evidence that any of these refugees are terrorists. We don't know that. Your concern is that there's that question mark, and we need to play it safe. Is that it?
No, it's beyond the question mark. If we will read what the FBI said, the FBI had admitted, again, in front of Congress, same testimony, that questionable interests have snuck into the country.
But I wonder, as I first heard this proposal, I thought to myself, wouldn't there be easier ways for terrorists to get into this country than to infiltrate or gather and be with the group of the refugees coming into this country, some of whom take 2 years even to get to this point, and now they know they're being scrutinized. I mean, you realize how many people have tourist visas that get into this country every single day? Is the next step to start watching and monitoring and putting surveillance on tourists to this country from if they come from somewhere in the Middle East?
And again, I'm not using my words. ISIS said, this is how we're going to do it.
Well, they're threatening everyone right now. So at what point? I mean, what I'm worried about here, I mean, are you fear-mongering?
You know, Winston Churchill in 1935 was accused of that very thing, of fear-mongering. But he proved to be right. All I'm saying is, let's don't look at words. Let's look at what's happened. We know one, if not two, of the 9 that struck Paris came into Paris via the refugee program that France has. We know ISIS says we have now 4,000 trained infantrymen in Europe via the European refugee program, and we're going to do the same thing in the United States. So I'm not speaking on opinions, I'm speaking of others and our enemies' words.
All right, many of these refugees are fleeing a very horrible situation in their country. And would you agree that that's what America is all about, to bring these folks,
it is,
wherever they may be in the world, if they're fleeing, a dictatorship or a situation that puts them at risk, this is safe haven.
Yes. But at the same time, it's a safe haven for my family and for your family. And so if FBI and Homeland Security are telling us they're coming in.
But I have not heard the FBI or Homeland Security advocate what you're suggesting we do here. I mean, you're going a step beyond what they're suggesting. They're not saying, all right, let's round up all the Syrians right now because it's such a great threat. I mean, don't you think they would do that if they're the ones with this information you're basing it on, but you're taking it a step beyond?
Just like Europe, before the German invasions of Nazi, we have become so complacent, so politically correct that our greatest fear is offending someone. My greatest fear is having a Paris, France happening in Tennessee.
And you don't believe that a terrorist could make their way in here through some other means?
Yes, they could.
It could.
Yes, they could. And they have. And they are.
Right. And so now, do you worry to some degree that by doing this and perhaps targeting a broad scope of the population, many of these Syrian refugees are women and children. I'm sorry, they're not terrorists. Okay, so if that's the case...
let's go back to that point you just made.
So the children are terrorists?
Yes. 73% of that Syrian population is men between 17 and 55. Does that not concern you right off the bat?
All right. Well, do you have a concern that if you do focus on them, in a way you're playing into the terrorists' hands, in that, okay, you have folks here that maybe are not radicalized, but then all of a sudden they feel themselves being put upon, and then they're sent out of the country or mistreated. I mean, some worry that if you take away freedoms in this country based on what ISIS is doing, you're playing into their hands. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I understand it, but that was the same argument that they gave. Let's go back to the Winston Churchill analogy. Winston Churchill said, the Nazis are building an army and they're coming after us. And they accused him of being a fearmonger. I wish the French and British had listened to Winston Churchill in 1935. That's all I'm advocating. I think the facts stand for themselves.
Let's take a call or two. Let's go to Paul. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Nick. How you doing?
Yeah, Paul, what's on your mind?
Nick, I am glad to say that I am the type of person that does not elect these people in office. I find it reprehensible what he's saying. It's totally against what we stand for. He don't want to accept the fact that it's people like him and his party, Nick, that effectively caused this problem by going into Iraq 10 years ago, 12 years ago, starting a war, creating a power vacuum, giving rise to ISIS, who expanded its footprint into Syria and caused these people to have to flee their homeland. He don't even want to talk about that. And now that him and his party have effectively caused this problem, and these people are fleeing for their lives, to heck with him. And he just don't want to go and say that his comments was taken out of context. That's completely BS. He wants to round them all up, women and kids, and ship them off. That's what him and his party is advocating in this country, and it's absolutely 100% wrong. I find it reprehensible. And my last comment is this, Nick. If you keep electing people like this gentleman, and if the people elect Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio, or any one of them idiots for the national election, Nick, I'm warning you right now. They are going to get us in a major war within 18 months of them getting in office, and it's going to be a major war, and all the factors and all the players in there, Nick, for it to even be a world war, that will get us in a world war if we elect these people in office.
Okay, Paul, hang tight on that. I will say Donald Trump, I think, this weekend talked about putting mosques under surveillance.
All I'm saying is let's look at FBI. Let's look at Homeland Security. What are these people saying? They're saying we cannot monitor them. We're saying that they're here and they're going to kill us. And one very important.
But they're not advocating what you're advocating.
No, I've taken the next step of. Now, my first thing was let's observe them. And then if. And if you read the entire article, Nick, if they exhibit these, then we have the National Guard pick them up. And I also said, or local.
What kind of signs would they be looking for as someone is being under surveillance? And who would be doing the surveillance? Would it be law enforcement?
TBI, law enforcement. Most common things, they tend to visit these websites where the Al Qaeda, Hamas, or ISIS. That's the most common. But this is beyond me on what. That's what the TBI, FBI, and those guys would do. You know, one other important thing. Why is it that not a single Syrian refugee has entered Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, for example? Why won't those countries and they won't let them in? You know why? They know that they're embedded with ISIS-trained terrorists. Those countries will not let those people in there. 73% are men fighting age.
Well, there's other political reasons for that, especially with Saudi Arabia, but you realize that as we speak, France, after the horrible attacks in Paris, continues to allow Syrian refugees into their country. We have to take a break on that note. When we come back, we'll be taking more of your phone calls and more with Representative Cassada about his proposal and his thoughts, and you're sticking to your guns. So we'll take a break and be back with more right after this. Stay with us.